Yeah, so I built this place with my own hand. You see this food? Bam, this texture, mwah, you know, it sticks to air. It sticks to air, and it's gonna stick in your belly if you manage to eat it. We got lots of great beverages here at the Great Pug. Made them all myself. I made them. You know, I just got my creative juices flowing. Like these bar taps, man. They're freaking awesome. Man, people love this shit. There's all sorts of cool stuff. We got these really hidden cool things. I think there's definitely here. You just gotta input the right passcode, but you know, you can't see it right now. Not on not on camera, man. I can't give away all the secrets. Damn it! What's the goddamn code? Like, what the hell, man? Come on! Yeah! We got this really cool guy called McBlues. He comes here, you know, every third week or so.
What the hell's going on here? Who are you?
Who are you, man?
Are you trying to impersonate me? I don't sound like that.
Who would want to do that? I'm Owlboy, dude.
Are you talking?
Come on, man.
Are you making a film in my bar too?
I made this.
I could kick you if I wanted to. That would prove.
Well, to kick you too if I had leg tracking. You ain't got no freaking legs. You got, what is that, carrots coming out of your behind?
You're trying to say you're me, but you're also trying to explain that you have legs?
I'm a freaking boy. You trying to tell me boys don't have legs? Get a grip, you freakazoid. Yeah?
What's up?
Did I get a burger?
Sure, man.
Can I get another drink?
Come on, man. Stop making this difficult for me. I'm a customer.
You're not a customer.
Owlboy?
What's up?
Yeah?
Could I get another drink?
Yes.
Come on, man. Come on.
You're wasting the honey juice.
I'm so confused.
The honey
juice, man.
Yeah, well, let's just get one of those mods in here and sell this dispute, huh?
Okay, I will.
They're not called mods. They're called hosts.
Shut up.
Well, you requested a host?
Yeah, this guy is trying to...
this guy is trying to freaking take over my bar, man.
What's going on?
Zarny Woo?
Go on. Come
Have
on.
you heard of him?
Sarny who? Who?
This is absurd. I don't go around hooting all the time, do I?
Ah.
You know me.
You log in with two
No,
clients?
you need to kick this guy.
I can't tell which is the real one.
Like, I'm here filming this awesome documentary about the life in the Great
I'll
Pug.
sell this.
And this...
Which one of you is the real owl?
I'm the real Owlboy.
I'm the real Owlboy.
Never mind. That didn't work.
Shoot him, bro.
I don't know. I can't decide.
Shoot him. Come on, man.
They both look
Do
the
right
same.
thing.
Both of you, hoot. Whoever's the best hoot must be the real Owlboy.
Hoot, hoot.
Hoot, hoot.
Hoot, hoot. Hoot, hoot. Hoot, hoot.
I'm gonna have to ask you guys to calm down. It's too much shooting.
Hoot, 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 hoot.
I think I'll ask Pill to take care of this.
Hoot, hoot.
Ah,
Thanks for helping sort that out, TCL.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Also, can I get a fork? Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everyone in between, tonight is Endgame, starring your hosts, Poplopo and Psych.
Oh.
And I guess starring Owlboy.
Also,
And we brought Nomono as well. We brought Nomono with too. Everyone, enjoy the show.
hey guys, thanks for coming. Welcome to
Hi
Endgame.
everyone, welcome. Hello. Oh, good. Excellent. Okay, welcome to Endgame. We our topic tonight is something that is relevant literally to every single person here. We're going to be talking about digital ownership, intellectual property, and that obviously is relevant to our VR world. But before we get into that, we have our community spotlight, who also happens to be our guest host for the day, which is Owlboy, who also designed and created the environment you're in now, the Great Pug.
Yeah.
Owlboy, step up to the center. Will you tell us about what you think about the destiny of humanity? Where's humanity headed? Where are we going?
I guess I'm generally positive about it. I think that humanity is going in a direction where information is becoming more and more distributed, and it's easier and easier to communicate good messages to people and to have people seek out things that are helpful and positive and also, I guess, correct. And I think right will win out when it's so easy for so much information to be spread that will make that clear.
I like that attitude. So that's our general trend towards spreading, I guess, information and distributing good stuff.
I hope so. That's how I feel whenever I look at like, I don't know. I'm 33 and I'm already at a point where I'm seeing younger generations give less of a shit about things, to worry less about the bad social pressures than we did in my generation. So I feel like kids they're getting a good influence of not worrying about all this, I don't know, societal BS that is a problem, but also being encouraged to see all the other good things about other societies and groups that they're not part of, and having insight into that, and not only knowing what's local to them and what might be toxic that's local to them.
More perspective.
Right, yeah, that information seems a lot more accessible now of what life is like for other people. So that's our general trend. Do you have like an idea of what exactly our society is going to look like in maybe like 100 years?
There'll probably be a lot of VR involved, a lot of AR involved, a lot of connectedness through long distances. I don't know. It'll be hard to know. That whole thing about why haven't we met aliens? Because they all went inward, and that's a very compelling argument to me.
I never heard that. What do you mean? What's the kind of general gist of that?
It's a solution to the Fermi paradox, where why haven't we met aliens? Wouldn't they have passed by now? There's so many stars out there, and so many people have been, or so many species might have been around longer than us. Well, one reason might be that as a society gets to a certain technological peak, they find VR, and then they just go inwards, and then they don't explore outwards.
We talked about that a lot when Chris Miranda was on the show. If we go inward, if we explore ourselves and the infinite dimensions that we can create, like that could go on forever, just as much as the universe could extend forever too. So it sounds pretty hopeful to me.
I think that's an interesting thing that could happen, but I'm not sure if it's good or bad.
Do you think the singularity is a real thing that might happen?
Runaway advancement, nearly overnight kind of change. AI inventing AI, that kind of. It seems very, very plausible, but I don't know how unstoppable it would be. You know.
Do you think
it's
our
hard to
instinct
know.
would be to put the brakes on it, like when we see it coming?
I think so. Yeah, I think if people were to start sensing that, they'd be going, wait a second. This is yet another thing that's like the sci-fi movies. We should do something about this.
I wonder if they're capable of sensing it, though, because technology has already developed so rapidly, like within our lifespan. But for us, it's just normal. Like that's just how it is.
Yeah, we don't have a perspective. Like a lot of us don't have a perspective of how fast things are changing. Like it just seems normal. I reflect on that sometimes and realize that I have no sense of how slow it was 100 years ago. As far as advancement.
Right, like we don't have that information because we've just got our own lifetimes and whatever else, and whatever takes place in that just seems like the way it is.
Yeah.
I think one thing that's changed dramatically in our lifetimes is like what the definition of ownership is. Boom, segue.
All right, thank you, Owlboy, for sharing your thoughts about the future. And yeah, like Nomono says, that's a great introduction into our topic.
So yeah, Owlboy, what are your thoughts about digital goods, and are they common? Are they rare? Like what's the state of them currently?
Well, I think they're super common. We're all hanging out inside of one particular digital good right now, and that's VRchat, right? And lots of us buy games on Steam. Lots of us buy movies and music and other software. If anybody's got a mobile phone, you're using digital goods on that. And it's all stuff that we've gotten used to buying and using, and it just kind of slowly crept up on us. I think it's like for most people, I think it started with music, because not a lot of people used to buy software, right? Like they'd get a computer and it'd come with some software and they just use that. But music was one of the first things lots of people started buying. I think movies are starting to creep up there, and for a lot of us, software is like how many of you buy way too many games at the Steam summer sale, or humble bundles, to numbers of games that you might not even get a chance to play, and those are all things like digital things you've spent money on that, well, you could argue they don't exist, but yet they do.
Yeah, they're like, they're like simulations of objects, right? So they're not actual objects you can hold, but we're like basically pretending that they are.
And people have made money. I think a key here is that the people who created those things have been able to create them because they were, have careers and were able to devote, a lot of time to the creation of that content.
I still remember the transition, and it was kind of weird to go through, right? Where to buy music meant you were buying a physical object. Like I bought a CD, right? And then I would, rip the CD, and now I have a digital copy of the CD. And then at some point you just buy the digital copy and there's no physical thing that you own. And, I didn't accept it.
You don't even need it at that point.
It felt weird. I didn't feel like I owned it right away, right? I'm talking like when this first started happening, I didn't feel like I owned anything. I felt cheated somehow, that like I was buying air.
Yeah.
Has that changed for you then? Do you now feel like you own it when you own a digital copy?
I think you're right that basically most of the stuff I own today is probably digital, right? I probably own more digital stuff than actual material things. And it's all way more integrated into my life than like, I don't even know what I would buy anymore. That's like a real, like, I'm not going to go buy a ball. Or like, what's a real physical thing that people buy nowadays? I can't even imagine.
I have no idea. I don't know. I just live my entire life in VR. Like it doesn't. I have no idea.
Oh my god!
What's really interesting to me about a lot of this stuff is not only is it something that we're slowly all getting used to, and the younger you are, the more used to, and the more normal it is to just buy something. Like you hear about little kids asking their parents about buying things on the App Store, right? And it's like they don't even have a concept of like that, like they're exchanging money for that thing. They just think that they're pressing a button to make it work on their phone. And that's just going to be so normal for them. And then all of this stuff, well, most of this stuff has DRM to like enforce restrictions and to make sure you can't distribute it and to control it. And it's something that's changed with some of the stuff, like music. There's lots of stores now, including iTunes and Amazon, that don't have DRM on their music. But everybody's also transitioning away from those stores now, and they're all going to things like Spotify and Apple Music and Beats and any of these other streaming services. So then they're paying a monthly fee for back to DRM. But now they get access to lots and lots of DRM, right?
Right. So with that one, it's not even. You're not even. What are you owning in that case? It doesn't seem to be.
You're owning
anything.
I guess you're buying the right to access it, the ability to have any song or something.
Yeah, it's almost like a ticket of sorts. Right?
You're renting, actually. You're not. Is it ownership?
Yep.
Do you think it's ownership?
I think it's more of a license to use the content. That can be revoked at any time, your subscription lapses, whatever. One of the interesting things I find about the Spotify type of mentality is it's kind of like stockpiling games from Steam sales and Humble Bundles. It's feeling like I need this big library of things just for options that I can have at any time so I can decide to do this or to do that at my own whim.
It's like how common is that? Like how many people have... I want to know like who has the most Steam games here. If we can go into
700 or more.
Oh, but I have
like 800.
Wow.
Yeah, I do.
I think I have like 100. That's about it.
100, yeah.
I have
65. 605.
900.
What's the percentage of those that you actually get to play?
About I played 100 of my games.
It's probably single digits.
I'm willing to admit that I buy and never use.
Oh god. Yeah, there's
years.
Zannywoop makes a good point. There's tools that tell you that fact.
Do you feel that your value when you're paying for Spotify or something like that versus the value of all the games that you have in the Steam library, do you feel differently about your attachment to the games in the Steam library? And if so, which one do you prefer?
I guess, I kind of do, I suppose.
Like the Steam library?
Would you rather
Spotify's model, but definitely do feel more attached to the games, even the ones I don't use, versus maybe the playlist that I've built. If I could delete half my Steam library and the games I never played, I would still miss them because I knew I paid for them. I know I own them. Or, well, I own them. A single thing could take down the entire Steam, and I would be without anything.
I almost get more of a sense of ownership from my Steam game list from like any standalone game that I just have on my hard drive. Like I kind of feel like I own those games less, and I think it's because like being in the Steam games list, like it legitimizes that ownership, or like it conveys kind of a message of you own this thing in a way that just having like an executable file in your hard drive doesn't really convey that as much.
I'm sure there's somebody at Valve who understands the psychology of that, and that's why they went full bore on letting anybody sell Steam keys. Because I'm sure that was something that was slowly ramped up, and it was probably something that they were reticent to do at first. But as soon as they like breached that, they realized like the power of like everything being in Steam and the power of it feeling like, it's in Steam. Like there's so many people who don't want to buy things on Origin or any of these other services just because it's not Steam.
And it's not even necessarily that I like those other services less, but like once you start joining services, it's like, okay, how many services do I need to join? Like I don't want to have 12 different things.
Right. And what if everything was included? What if your access, I mean, are we heading towards a place where your access to all art, to all music is just going to be a monthly fee? Or is it like, can my Amazon toothpaste also be included in that monthly fee? Like, are we just going to give a bundle of money every month? Or where is this? So, I mean, and especially for Owlboy, like, where do you think that's heading? Are we just going to be spending an increased amount of money on these subscriptions and stuff? Or
it's very plausible. TV and cable keep going that way. Everybody is coming out with their own little niche subscription thing. Everybody always said they wanted a la carte cable, and now they're starting to get it, and they're starting to realize, that means $5 a channel or $10 a channel every month, and that's not necessarily what they want. And then Xbox and PlayStation are starting to do more. Like Xbox just announced like an all-you-can-access kind of Netflix-style Xbox game thing that they're going to be doing. I forget the name of it. I think it's inevitable that Apple's going to do something that's very similar to Netflix. And everybody's going to try to do this. Everybody's going to try to do Netflix. Music is already doing it. That's working great. But it's weird to think that we'll just go back to this other thing where all of a sudden these companies or things will pop up and they'll say, hey, I can sell you a bundle. I've got Netflix and I've got Xbox and I've got Apple Music. And you pay this one $80 fee a month and then you get all that. Like, it's kind of weird.
Doesn't that change the paradigm of what it's like? You know, before if you buy an album from a CD, you're paying the record company and then you're paying the artist, who's like, you're basically almost more directly paying the artist. And now we're shifting to this model where you're really paying a company, and it's kind of ambiguous as to, even if like you make a song that I really, really like and I listen to it 100 times on Spotify, it's as opposed to buying it for $1.
Man, I didn't think about that, because I guess I really thought we were going the other way. And I think we were for a long time, right? It's only with these new services that like you are inserting a middleman, stronger and stronger.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, they get a higher cut. It's like that's reducing the amount the artist gets or something.
How are they responding in some way? I don't know what the attitude of like musicians is nowadays. Like if they like
like Taylor Swift taking her music. She took her music. She didn't release an album on a certain streaming or whatever streaming services, like all that. But in general, they're kind of forced to go with the flow because if they want to make any money,
I think I just read about Kanye leaving Tidal because he's not getting paid enough. And like he was part of making Tidal a thing, so like he's that invested that he's going to pull out.
I would prefer for everyone to sign up to Tidal, right? To get the album on Tidal. That's what I prefer.
Nobody likes Tidal.
All like those Steam games that you have, like imagine if you actually own them physically and you just had them in your garage. Like this is definitely improvement over that. Like you're talking about sort of the worry of like, I guess I'm stockpiling and it feels weird once you sort of reflect on it. But imagine reflecting on physical goods that you're stockpiling.
Am I the only person who has these weird thoughts about their Steam library, thinking like, when I finally have kids, my kids can play with all these games, right?
I definitely thought about that.
That's like how big, right? Like, or they came out with family sharing. Yeah, see, that's silly. There's actually, that's a whole nother topic about like bequeathing these libraries to other people, right? In your will, like that has to be a thing eventually.
Don't most of these electronic services have like a clause in there for if you see? I guess I don't really know for sure, but it seems like they.
If you become deceased.
Like here's what happens with your account.
Rejinx, you had some.
I was going to say, just talk about the subscription. It seems like the world's moving to a subscription model for almost everything. And I actually thought about that, like, if we ever go to a basic income nationally, I know that's been talked about before, that people will actually put together life bundles where, like, you just sign over your full check and you get an apartment, you get internet, you get blah, 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 like a life bundle. And basically you don't even have money. You're just giving it straight monthly, paying for everything.
Oh, that's so fascinating. That's the first time I've heard that this discussed in the context of universal basic income. And I think the idea of a life subscription, I mean, like, how is it plausible? Like, what are people going to do with this money?
It's that eternal thought about progress and prosperity and how we're going to have so much leisure time for arts and socializing and being together as humans. Like that's a continuation on that. That's been around for centuries.
And maybe that's where we see, you mentioned the alien populations that might have looked inward on their societies. Maybe once you achieve, it's like in Age of Empires when you upgrade your civilization or whatever, like maybe we're on the precipice of upgrading, to whatever age.
You sort of prestige into like a simulation where nothing matters anymore.
It's all the same, but I know it's virtual.
What's kind of interesting though, and I know we haven't really talked about the subject yet, but if your license is revoked when you die, so if your subscription is revoked when you die, your license to your Steam games goes away when you die. That kind of stands in contrast to the way intellectual property works from the other end. So not from the end of the user, but from the end of who owns the intellectual property, like they can die and their intellectual property carries over to whoever they assign it to. That kind of distinguishes it from being your intellectual property, is that you don't get to decide what happens to it after you die. Whoever provides that to you, decides. And so that kind of is the distinction between things that you, like intellectual property that you purchase and then intellectual property that you own, is kind of like there is seems like there's a distinction there.
Wow, did you have something to add? I know you were.
I actually had a comment from Sarah slightly earlier, but still on the same topic, talking about Steam versus other services. And she said Uplay and Origin, for example, are less diversity friendly in terms of their system structures, and their return capabilities are not as good as what Steam offers. And she also wanted to mention that if she had the chance, she would will her Steam account to a friend. Is probably what she'd do.
Okay, yeah.
Donating.
That makes sense. But yeah, so there is competition between the different platforms in terms of where, what's the return policy? What's, what are you allowed to do as a user? What kind of freedoms do you have and everything? But it's the sort of competition where some stuff that is just taken for granted, kind of, I feel like, which is the ownership aspect.
Right, because we all license all of this stuff. Even when we actually think we purchased it, there's lots of digital games that you buy on discs where technically you don't own it. You just have a license to it, but you happen to have a physical copy of it too.
Right.
That's true with tons of software. And it's true with any digital movies or music you buy or anything you buy on Steam and all that. Valve has said that if Valve was ever to go under, which that would be insane at this point, that they would do something, they would do right by all their customers and they would give them all copies of their things.
They have a soul.
So I would assume at some point, especially since they've progressed to a point of even having returns, I bet you at one point they would, if enough people pestered them and enough time passed, I bet you they would do things like allow you to will your library. The crux of it is it's all up to them, and the way they can enforce it is with DRM.
Yeah. And
they could revoke it at any time. I have a few examples, but sadly they're all Microsoft examples. The original Xbox, they shut down Xbox Live. You can no longer get to any of the DLC you might have bought on the original Xbox, which that was early days DLC, so there's not much. They had this thing called Game Room on 360. Yeah. Did you
you feel cheated because you didn't think about it ahead of time. You're like, oh shit, I didn't realize this was a temporary thing.
Right.
Oh, when you
right.
spent the money. I wonder if there are lawsuits about that.
Like, I thought I owned it.
Maybe.
Well, it's
Yeah.
probably in the license
Yeah.
agreement that you agree to relinquish your rights.
Right.
Blah, blah,
Yeah,
blah.
you can't. I mean, that would be hard to bring a lawsuit against because, like, you agreed to it in the first place, probably.
Yep.
I just remember, I can't remember if it was Origin or Steam, but there was some country, I can't remember its name for the life of me right now, I apologize, but there was a trade embargo. It was either Origin or Steam, basically cut the entire libraries and access to the entire country. So people who had bought in these libraries had their games. The plug was just completely pulled on them. I think they've since maybe worked
Origin?
around it, but maybe. It was that or Steam, I can't remember.
Sarah says it's Origin.
Yeah, so basically, yeah, because of the trade embargo, they just pulled the entire plug on a country and everyone was just without their library.
Oh, that kind of sucks for all involved. Because I'm
China.
sure that they didn't want to do that.
No, it's a smaller country.
Well, Sarah says
They've-
it's China.
There's been weird cases too where games are still available, but like they've gone in and ripped out songs or other content because they lost the license to that bit of content to put in the larger license of the whole game.
Mm.
And the most hilarious one that I think is funny from Microsoft is a long time ago they used to have MSN Music, and it was all encrypted with this DRM called Plays for Sure.
Wait, let
And
me
that got
guess.
shut down, and all of that doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't play for sure. Right.
So it's one of those things where it's not guaranteed. Not when it has to call home and authenticate and call back.
My brother is in computer science, and his friend is the one who discovered that you can hold a button on the keyboard when you put a CD in the like. This was a long time ago, and DRM was only on CDs. It kind of counteracts all of the DRM basically, and you can just rip in the entire CD. And then he got
I'm sure they
basically
shut that down
slammed
really quickly.
Well, and what does that mean to be shut down? And it means that these huge mega corporations basically slap lawsuits on you and call you and say that they're going to sue you from, and then you're just like, oh, whoa. So not only are we giving money, it's interesting, not only are we giving money to these kind of holders of content and creation, but we're also arming them with the legal ability to pursue. And we see this with all the Hollywood related, like SOPA, and being able to take down with copyright notices.
It's really interesting with a lot of this media how fair use would tell you it's okay to share that movie or to do something interesting with that movie or that song. But the law says you can't break the DRM on it. So they wouldn't get you for fair use or for using it and appropriating the content. They'd get you for breaking the DRM because you circumvented the DMCA, Digital Millennium Copyright Act. We've been watching movies in VRchat in various theaters and stuff around VRchat recently in the past few months. And I personally, I'm doing a thing where I'm paying for the movies that I'm showing, but then I have to break the DRM on them so I can show the exact copy that I just bought.
So here's a question.
Totally fair use because you're all just coming over to my house and watching it with me, right?
Right. Well, that's kind of what I had a question about. So we're getting into an age where we are just thoroughly just more tracked throughout our day. We could, we've all got our phones, there's big data. People are getting big data from us all the time. And in that kind of scenario, we're kind of using the parallel of, okay, it's like if I brought my friends over to my house and watched a movie together. But what if even that, what if we all had integrated technology in our biology, if we all become cyborgs eventually, where we can't even view a material without, what if we I can't go over to someone's house and watch a movie until we sign in and license the content. Seems like a possibility. It's scary.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Nomono,
Just extend that license farther and farther, right?
Yeah. Well, what's going to stop them, right? Because it's them. They get to decide how the stuff is used. They get to decide what the end user license agreement says. They get to. They decide that, and then everyone kind of decides whether they want to get the benefits of that or not.
Totally. And I feel like I keep picking on Microsoft, but doesn't Microsoft have a patent for the Kinect to detect if you're detect what you're watching and who's there in the room watching, so that they they can charge you more for a pay-per-view event or something like that? They can tell how many people are in the room and so.
I think it's worth it to them.
I don't know, man.
You're a valuable product, my friend.
I think Lau's going to buzz us now with a question. from Sarah.
What was the unplug the Connect? Was that the
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, right. But then you can't run your licensed content. The license requires you to have it plugged in.
Speaking of cameras watching you, doesn't the Oculus Rift use cameras
Oh my God, I know.
track everything?
It does.
Yep, infrared.
It does, but it's
can see
questionable
you.
about what the cameras can see. There's a debate about how detailed it is.
I mean, you got to remember though, people are terrified of Furbies because they can listen to audio. So
The thing that really interests me about all of this, and I think of all of this stuff we've talked about as kind of history for what is the future, and more on topic of what Endgame's all about, which is things like the metaverse or the future of humanity. And I think a lot of these digital goods, like in the things we talk about them and the way that they're thought about and licensing and all that kind of stuff, goes straight into like hats I could put on, or clothing I could wear, or maybe even the pug itself, or my avatar or your avatar, or any other thing that represents a real world object inside of a virtual space. And at that point, I think a lot of people have, like, they struggle a little bit more about, like, do I really own this digital good? And maybe they care about it a little more, or maybe they don't. I don't know.
Are you saying that you sort of feel like you own, like if you bought clothes in here or a hat, that feels less than buying a song or a movie?
I think it would depend on the the specific comparison. Like, I'm imagining like two slots where you got to put in a movie and a shirt, and then I'd be like, the movie's a little more, or put in a song in a digital land, and I'd be like, oh, the land's more important than the song.
Yeah, the context contributes the value to it. So obviously, if there's a hat you buy in a game that you never play, that's just not going to have as much value to you, like in terms of its price or even like its sense of ownership. If you are a big VRchat user and you got clocked 400 hours on it, and you buy a piece of clothing, like that might actually feel like ownership to you. That you clocked 400?
I just hit 400 right before I logged in tonight.
Wow.
At least on Steam. Yeah. Anyway.
Right.
Well, also, it's interesting because I actually, what you guys are talking about, I paid for something, digital content. This is the most I've ever paid for digital content. This avatar, which was 3D scanned or whatever, at a conference, I paid MechFi to optimize it for VRchat because I was like, all right, that's a worthy cost. And I mean, it took him several hours, and so it's a legitimate cost to pay a developer like several hours or whatever. And like now, it's something that I can have forever. So it's like, to me, it's worth it.
You feel like you own this.
Yeah, especially because I have the Unity file, and so it's actually it's like it is the CD in my bookcase kind of thing.
I think you're driving at the heart of why I find digital goods in a virtual space most interesting, and a little more interesting than songs, movies, and games. Is, do we actually own the things? Do you really own that?
Right.
You feel a sense of pride and ownership over it now, but do you really own that?
Because it's on my computer, I feel like I do.
It's on my computer.
Because it's a file.
Yeah, I mean, it is technically on our computer because we've got it in our cache,
Yeah. So
I've got some friends who could rip it for me right now.
Yeah.
I feel like that's almost like you own this thing that anyone with a 3D copier, so to speak, or the whatever version of the 3D copier can just throw into 3D copier, and then they can steal it, quote unquote. But I still feel that because it's on my computer and not like only in VRchat or only on like the marketplace or whatever, that I do feel a level of ownership that goes beyond, but it's an illusion almost. So I don't know.
And I'm not picking on you. I have similar feelings about my avatars because I've built all of my avatars and I feel a great sense of identity with mine. And I think you might have similar feelings.
Yes. Yeah. Like there was a glitch the other day where like someone accidentally was wearing my avatar because it overwrote the blueprint or something like that. And like I looked over and I saw someone in my avatar, and like my sense of identity felt it was just weird. Yeah, it did feel a little challenged because I do identify with this shape. Whether because it's something I wear or because it's something I made, I'm not really sure. But I do feel the sense of ownership, and I definitely feel this uncertainty about whether I actually own it or not.
Do you feel that way too, Nomono? Because I know you're in an interesting space where you've adapted from a very, very accessible avatar, but it's still to me, this is you.
It's individual.
This is very much you.
Well, you added the heart, right? Or did you've changed it a little bit, haven't you?
Well, yeah, she did everything for me.
At
not...
his request. So yeah, the color scheme and the heart and the badge are all his design. Yeah.
How did you feel, Nomono, when you changed from?
I feel great.
Generic...
I feel superior. I feel like this is me, but since it is based on something, like I don't feel like I have rights to it. You know what I mean? So like, there's a separation there.
Owning ideas is kind of where this whole thing comes down to, right? Because we don't own an object, but we own the idea of an object and whatever that happens to mean. So like patents are a good example of this. When someone invents something, they own that invention, which is just a concept. It's just an idea. It's not something that exists in the real world until they make it. And then when they do, it becomes a physical object or not that gets distributed. But like that's kind of what intellectual property comes down to, is like what's ownable and what's not. And I feel like the answer to that question overwhelmingly comes from capitalism that says, oh, we're going to own the things that we can profit off of owning, and the things that we can't profit off of owning, we're not going to do that. So like, I feel like the economic system has kind of determined that for us, but it wasn't always that way. Our concept of what ownership is and kind of what it means and what intellectual property is has absolutely changed over hundreds of years. Thousands of years ago, for example, ancient Greece, their concept of ownership and authorship was even different. You could write a book and say, oh, this book was written by so-and-so, like someone completely different. Like I could write a book, say, oh, Aristotle wrote this book, and distribute it, and people would take it more seriously because it was written by someone like they'd already heard of. It was accepted, it was normal, and then like for the vast majority of our species' history, like music and songs and story, like folk tales, you know, like all these things, they didn't belong to anybody. Like that wasn't an idea in someone's mind that like a folk tale could belong to the person who thought it up. Like that just wasn't a thing. And so our agreement about what's ownership and what's not has absolutely changed over the years. And it's also not something that we take into account either. Like no one kind of, again, it comes down to where the money's at, I think, which is, you know.
First, a little side note, Psych, the idea that you 3D scanned Avatar, which looks amazing, makes me wish I could have 3D scanned an avatar of me 16 years ago and use that one instead of what my current one would look like.
That was part of the incentive. I'm not gonna lie.
Get your 3D scan as young as you can.
Poplopo, though, that's actually the idea I wanted to speak of. Is that I recently watched Crash Course Film History, and it had an interesting part about how patents in early film history, they wouldn't, like, a patent or copyright of a film idea wasn't allowed, but it made it where innovation in film happened very rapidly at the birth of film, because you were completely unable to patent or copyright any ideas. And ultimately, with the amount of like things basically never entering the public, like no intellectual property ever enters the public domain anymore, like ever. It made me realize that, like, I almost think it would be better if there was just none. Like there was no legal protection for ideas. Your ability to defend it yourself through DRM or whatever is the only defense you have against it, not legal defense. But the only problem is, I didn't think about y'all with y'all personal identities. That's a different issue I never thought about. I thought of it as more of a corporate thing. I think that it would be better if just like more innovation if there was just no protection legally.
That kind of brings up an interesting point. I don't know if any of you are interested in the topic of intellectual property law. The book Free Culture is really, really good. Highly recommend it. And it kind of goes into that, like the rationale behind having law, like having legal protection, is presumably so that creative work will be done, so that we can basically provide some sort of reward system for those who do create work. Because if you write
actually
a book,
works completely opposite of what it's intended to do.
I'm not sure it's that black and white. For example, if you write a book down and like it's a really good book and you don't own the copyright to it, anyone who's got a printing press can publish that book and sell it and not give any profits to you. And so that's happened for things like, the movie The Last Unicorn. If any of you are familiar with that, the author of the book The Last Unicorn does not get any profits off of that, just because of like what he signed up for with his publishing house. The copyright and everything laws happen in such a way that he doesn't get any returns on that. So like he kind of owns the idea, but he's not getting any reward for it. And it's that sort of situation that at least legally is kind of used as the basis for why we should have copyright law, because culture, like we want to create culture, we want to support artists, that sort of.
Do you think if people could not profit from their music by selling it digitally, do you think people would stop making music?
Well, clearly no, because people do make music for free, but would it be as high quality? Would production values be high in that case?
That's the question I have about digital goods in a metaverse, and if people would create things if they didn't have the right incentive. And how do we make that incentive? Will that incentive exist? Will people just break DRM? Will platforms that are popular have to be platforms that don't allow us to bring in any old avatar we want? Because then we don't have incentive to buy things. We could just copy it or rip it or make our own.
That's the good thing about making a platform where, okay, like if a person can sell a digital card to you more than once, if they're selling it to you in 2 or 3 different games, because you don't want to spend the time to have to rip it and upload it and get around any DRM they have, even if it's not legally, there's a huge convenience factor.
Like Sarah mentioned kind of uniquely that not only is that her head, but she also modeled it herself. So that's kind of the case of if that is really her IP, essentially, because she owns it. So for me, like the copyright thing is actually really important to me, since I'm a writer. So for say a book that I have completed, I probably would have put in maybe anywhere from a year to several years of work on it, kind of working away, trying to make it the best I can. And I like the fact that somebody can't just take my book and change the title and sell it on Amazon. I mean, they can, and it happens, but at least I have some legal recourse. But of course, I'm like, I don't, nobody's heard of me. So if you take an example of someone like J.K. Rowling, obviously Harry Potter, she's multimillionaire from that, but without copyright protection, there would be a million people making Harry Potter, and there already are, but they're fanfics. And nobody can go and say, I'm J.K. Rowling, and I wrote Harry Potter and the pink kissable llama, and sell that and make people think that J.K. Rowling.
I want to read that book.
Not yet.
So I'm glad as a creator. Yeah, but I'm glad as a creator that I do have some protection because I'm spending all this time, creating a book and putting work into it, and I do have some protections.
Do you really feel you have protection though? I feel like I have very similar protection over the pug and somebody not taking it and putting it on high fidelity or something, right? But do I? I don't have the money to fight that. Do you have the money to fight that?
So J.K. Rowling does have the money to go after someone who takes her books because obviously she's popular enough that it would be profitable. For me, sure, somebody could probably rip off one of my books, but again, since almost nobody's heard of me, there's not really profit involved in that. You don't care. And I do care. I like that if it happened, that I would at least have some legal recourse. And sometimes it's not even lawyers. Sometimes it's as simple as my books are on Amazon. So I just basically email Amazon and say, hey, this is my material. And they look at it. It's like, oh, that's similar. Boop, and that is booted off. So, and that happens all the time. There's all sorts of counterfeit stuff going up on Amazon constantly. And it's constantly going up and coming down and going up and coming down. And it's just something that continues.
That sounds like a nightmare.
I had one thing actually from Sarah. She just wanted to mention that the EULA and using our creations publicly can circumvent those creative rights. And using our creations publicly.
VRchat has a license to your face now. Yeah. That's what you're saying.
Can circumvent those creative rights.
Yeah.
That's weird, right?
Your face.
and yours.
Psych's face too.
Yeah. And Psych.
Yep. And Psych's face. Your whole body, man.
Wow. You signed your body away.
Your body belongs to VRchat.
It means I can find license and 3D print them and make a series of action figures.
Yes, forever.
Oh, that's weird.
Well, it's almost like performance rights. Like there's all these old songs that are out of copyright, but like this specific orchestra performed it, so they have the rights, like copyright on that performance. It's almost like they have a license to this performance of you.
how well can they really enforce that when people upload avatars that we don't even own the rights to and another company owns the right to? This is owned by Disney, right? So can they really have the user like, oh, do they own
We've
Peter
avoided
Pan
talking
now? I
about
don't think
Disney this
so.
whole time, as far as copyright goes.
Right. So it just seems weird to me to think that they're utilized at any amount enforceable, because I mean, come on, look at all this in here. You think they really own this? I highly doubt it. I mean, they can write it all they
Everybody
want.
on stage, we're fine.
It's a gray area though, because the EULA also says that users can only upload content to which they have the intellectual property right to do so, and they don't enforce that. But if a user does that, and then there's the other clause that says, okay, VRchat also has the right to use, whatever you bring into VRchat, whatever you upload to the servers, like that hits a gray area immediately because they didn't enforce the one thing. So like, what is this other thing enforceable too? Yeah, I agree. That's takes it right into some weird territory there.
I'm so curious where things are going to go and how it's going to happen. Like George Lucas, I remember having a real problem with like fan films early on, and so he would shut them down and like go legally against people who were celebrating his movies. And like, I understand why there's some protection there, right? You don't want someone to take Star Wars and make money off of it. But then when it's like fans doing something for fun to celebrate, that feels like they should be able to do it. And here, like when I read Ready Player One, I was like, oh my God, dope, dude. Everyone's here. I got fucking Doc Brown. I got whoever, like all my favorite characters show up. And how can you translate that into real life? Like here we are. Most of these are customized avatars that aren't from IPs, but some of them are owned by some Disney. Other corporation. But like, don't they benefit in some way from like allowing them to exist in the world? Like it gets so fuzzy. I don't know what to think about it.
Say Disney wanted to sell a Peter Pan avatar in here. You'd be damn sure they don't want him to bring in his own copy then, right?
But what if his is a little bit different, right? He has what if it's me, right? What if you could buy the original Adam, but I have my special version?
Is that fan art, or is that fair use, or is that just...
That's when the law comes in. And I think what we're saying is there's going to be a new area, I think, of the law that has to be debated. I mean, it'll be extended to VR, but there'll be different elements. Like this avatar isn't just a thing that is copyrighted. It is me. It is the exact image or whatever. So maybe that's a new area of law or whatever. But also, Evolved, you had a question too?
Interesting thing that happened to me that I don't know if you guys discussed or not in any way, but I have purchased a character in the game League of Legends, and I purchased the character after trying it out and say, oh, I really like this character. It's really fun to play. I like the mechanics. I like the way it fights. And a month later, it turns out that I was one of the few people who actually liked the character, and most of the community hated it and complained. So because of that, the company went ahead and completely revamped the character and completely threw everything out and rebuilt it. So now what I purchased for what I liked is now something completely different. So what do you think about that, the concept of owning something digitally that may not be exactly the same in the future?
Imagine if you owned the license to watch, like, let's just say the original Star Wars, A New Hope, and then at some point it gets updated, and he fucking does like the revision, I forget what it's called, where everything sucks, and you can no longer watch the old one. You bought the license, so
they just updated it in place, and it's in your library.
Like, this is a negative example, but then there are positive examples too. So like when you own a game and then it gets updated. This happens on Steam a lot with things like early release. Like if you buy an early release, you often get the updates to when it gets better, you also own that too. But there's also older games like Half-Life that Sarah mentioned that those are getting updated, and so good things are happening with that too, and they pretty much have the freedom to do good or bad things with it.
There's a chance that a large percentage of the other people who bought that avatar actually like all the updates. And that's a weird, awkward position to be in, right? It's like, no, it was great how it was. And everybody else is like, nah, it's so much better now.
I feel like it's kind of a Ship of Theseus problem at that point, though, because we were talking about owning an idea. And so he purchased the idea of this character to be utilized in this particular context. And then the character itself changed. does that make it the same character? At which point is it not the same object that he purchased anymore? Like,
how many bytes have to be removed and added before it's a different ship?
It's not the same. Yeah, before it's an entirely different object, before it's an entirely different piece of software or piece of merchandise. I mean, that's a whole other question, but it is relevant because we are talking about owning ideas, and ideas by their very nature are so interchangeable. And like we see this with pretty much any idea out there gets expanded upon instantly, like immediately. It turns into something else as soon as it hits someone else's mind. So like you tell a story, the other person that hears that story, it's a different story in their head. You know, it's why this gets so tricky, is because it's so unclear. When you own an object, that means that you have the object and you're able to make decisions about it. If you own an idea or own a concept, like how much does that concept have to change before it's not the one that you have control of anymore?
What things or what attributes do you think digital goods in the metaverse will have to have that'll actually make people want to buy them? To pay real money to get like a hat or to get an avatar or to have access to land or any of these things. Is there anything that would actually give you incentive to buy it? Are there things that would push you away from actually paying for anything?
Do you mean like the kind of hat, or do you mean the fact that only I would have that hat?
That would be my question. Is that an incentive? So is exclusivity, rarity something? Is the fact that it does or doesn't have DRM a reason why you would pay for something? I know there's lots of people who say they don't buy movies because they're all DRM'd, and they're just like, screw that. If I can't get it without DRM, I'm not going to buy it, and then they just pirate it. Would you say the same thing about an avatar or a hat? Like, would you buy a digital object to put in your digital apartment if you could just copy it from a torrent?
I was having this exact same conversation yesterday with somebody, actually, and they brought up Second Life. And it's like everything you're saying right now, you're saying that's what people do in Second Life with real money.
Do you have insight into the dynamics of Second Life? Do you know how permissions work on that stuff?
No, I haven't played it myself.
Strict
but
rules? Or does anybody else know?
I've spent time on Second Life. I didn't get into the details of how everything worked, but like I know that the ownership in Second Life is built into the infrastructure. So you conjure an object into existence, and then the object itself like has various properties. Is it copyable? You know, can someone else copy it into their inventory? Is it purchasable? Can someone else purchase it and then take it into their inventory? Like it's all built into the object itself. Like it's kind of like a smart object, I guess. And in order to be able to like copy or pirate it, you need to kind of extract the object from whatever source you have and then kind of re-upload it on your own terms and as an entirely new object. But as far as I know, the infrastructure of Second Life is pretty effective. I didn't hear about a lot of theft going on there. I'm not sure if that's just not something I heard about a lot.
One thing that they actually, Philip Rosedale, one of the creators of Second Life, he was talking about their next social app, and he's the creator of High Fidelity. And he was saying that Second Life actually, they kind of beat themselves over the head for not taking a higher percentage of the transactions that were occurring in Second Life.
When I hear that, I think about how Second Life did focus on land, and that was something that they did make money from, right? And that's something very enforceable. You can't pirate land in Second Life, right? You can't download and upload your own land. But objects,
because it's space.
If they switch though, and they went focused on the objects and tried to be like, oh, it's just like an app store. It's just like a digital movie store or something. But we're going to do it with objects and shirts and avatars and other interesting things. They would probably have more incentive to try to enforce even more because, as I understand it, Second Life has all those rules, but they don't technically have DRM. There's ways for third parties to come in and put in their own DRM, but it's not something that they support directly. But I would wonder if they would move closer to DRM if they really wanted just to focus on all the objects and less on the land.
That's what we were talking about specifically, was actually modeling objects, and like how a lot of it is just marketing to get people to buy stuff, like gachas, like gachapon.
Is that like a fidget
Or
spinner?
like, say if I made like 10 different alpacas and there's like a golden one that everybody wanted.
Those toy machines,
really
you put a
rare,
couple
like,
quarters in, crank, and get a capsule.
Yeah, so like exclusivity, as long as there's some way that this stuff is being enforced, as long as there's still like admins and the law and everything, it'll have value.
Like a strict computer-enforced set of social rules. instead of DRM would be enough for you.
Isn't that pretty much the same thing?
Oh, I guess I think of DRM as an encryption that keeps you from being able to do any kind of copying, like not even ripping or pirating. Not always preventing. I know everybody's thinking like DRM can be broken, but the goal of DRM is to prevent you from being able to break it.
I'd hope that stuff is still enforceable in some way, but just legally at least. So like nobody can go and make money off of it without, drawing attention and maybe becoming worth pursuing legally.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
but human nature.
I agree with Sarah. Just hold still while you talk, would you? You're kind of jumping around. It's...
Ownership, and if we own something, if we can really own something, no matter it be physical or digital, it's all a social, cultural construct of we all agree that you can own that or you can't own that, right?
So I'm gonna go all the way back to the very beginning when you were talking about the way that things were gonna work out, right? Where you said like there's all this information out there and it's accessible, so it's changing the world. Is this something that you think will naturally work out? Like, do you think there is some kind of social contract we all will feel comfortable with and it will naturally move in that direction? Like, is there some way you would want it to go, or do you have a feeling about where this might ultimately lead?
I do have feelings that it could go towards more of a cultural economy. And I think this goes towards a book you guys have been reading.
Walk Away?
Yeah.
And yeah, I some of the benefit I really got from reading that book is to kind of present a vision of the way society could be that I wouldn't have otherwise imagined. That's a huge benefit that I'm getting from it. So in this walk away culture, it's like people are walking away from society, right? And they enact this kind of live action GitHub open source Burning Man ethos like that is like all about gift economy and open source everything, and like mutual cooperation is the rule, and the like it's really cool to see it put into just kind of a world. And that's one of the benefits of fiction in general, I think, is to kind of present ideas in a way that would otherwise be kind of inaccessible. So I like imagining that sort of stuff, but it's also set against the backdrop of the collapse of like normal society, and like the rich people getting richer and richer and richer, and they all go to war with each other, and like there's a bunch of conflict that has to happen alongside that. Like, it's even in the book, it's not just this peaceful progression into that sort of state. Yeah, today is the net neutrality day, right?
Yeah.
That wasn't yesterday. That was today. Every single time there's a win for net neutrality, like it's a win, but it's like this constant uphill battle because all the opposing forces are going to take all their money and then just like fight back just as hard. Like every time we win, it's not a solid win that's going to be like a structurally stable
precedent. It won't be a precedent that keeps it.
Yes. Yeah, nothing is like a solid enough precedent that it keeps this from becoming an issue later, because they'll just come back and they'll fight and they'll try to pass bills or get things revoked. Like it just keeps. So they were talking about we need some sort of structural integration that prevents the money from winning. Like we want to come up with some way to structure it so that this is enacted, and something like just whoever happens to have the most money isn't going to be able to change it at their whim. It's a constant battle to keep this net neutrality and all of the public interest essentially from being the right thing for the public.
Oh,
okay,
Sarah said you something.
Money begets money, so radical social restructure can't happen unless people start paying attention to facts instead of hyperbole.
But that goes along with something Owlboy was talking about, right? Where like now that's actually possible. I think we used to live in a world where it was really difficult to get facts for everyone, right? For them to be widespread.
Yeah, there would have to be radical censorship, I think, to get around. And that's my optimistic utopian view, I guess, in a way, especially from other people's point of view, it's utopian. But I think it's possible for that information to keep spreading and have people understand because I don't know, a lot of it seems like logic and not so much, I don't know, opinion. A lot of this access is good and information is good, and so.
Well, because so much of it too is our social agreement, right? Like we have to agree on what's going to occur and what the rules are and what ownership means, and like it is very much a social contract. Like this all comes down to, okay, what do we want with each other as a society?
Yeah,
it's hard to come to an agreement. Like how are we going to agree on this stuff?
I can't even answer that question just for myself, right? When I start weighing a lot of the stuff you guys have talked about, like how much right do I want the artist to have? How much rights do I want society to have to like gain from the art? If I can't figure it out for myself, like how are we going to agree with each other?
Yeah,
it'll
it's
take
tough,
some time.
but makes for some interesting.
I guess there's no answers. I mean, we'll find out.
It makes for some really interesting conversation. I really love discussing, and I love hearing your guys' input. Are we at that point? Do we have a nugget?
We're looking for the
Anybody got
nugget.
a nugget?
If anybody has a digestible nugget, a little piece of wisdom to give us to wrap it all up.
You own what other people let you, I think is.
I own what other people let me.
All right, I mean that's a pretty good nugget. That feels like gold quality, platinum quality nugget.
When it comes to ownership, like what we're looking at is the ability to empower ourselves and each other to create our own culture. That's ultimately what we're doing. All of this, all of our art, this is about the culture that we exist in, and I think we're all pretty interested in building that together, building our world and building our content and our art and creating the world that we want to live in. And ownership and ideas and all the structure of that is just a big part of that. It's like an integrated part of our whole, of our whole social system, of our whole social structure.
We did it! All right. So wait, everybody get up here. We got to do a big group picture.
Yeah.
Right, we can all get on stage.
Come up here. The stairs are over there.
There's stairs over here.
On the stage?
Oh, okay.
Yay.
All right.
Who owns this picture? No one knows. Woo.
Yeah.
If you can't open it, you don't own it.
Nisok's just out of frame.
I wanna see a change tonight. A change tonight. Death still faces me, but I'm on.